When Prince William appeared at a charity gala in London, no one expected the future King of England to pick up a guitar. The royal family is known for their grace, diplomacy, and formality, not for spontaneous musical performances. Yet that evening, an unexpected moment would silence critics around the world. What began as playful teasing from one of the world's most famous guitarists quickly turned into one of the most talked-about royal moments in years. As the story goes, the event was filled with global celebrities, actors, musicians, philanthropists, all gathered to raise funds for mental health awareness, a cause close to Prince William's heart. Among the star-studded crowd was a legendary guitarist, known for his sharp tongue and confident personality. During casual conversation, the musician jokingly asked the prince if he could really handle a six-string or if his talents ended at royal speeches. The crowd laughed politely, assuming William would laugh it off too. But instead, the Duke of Cambridge smiled, reached for the guitar, and adjusted the strap with the calmness of a man who had nothing to prove, but everything to express. What followed stunned the audience. His fingers moved with precision and emotion, revealing years of quiet practice and genuine passion for music that few knew existed. The guitarist who mocked him could only watch, speechless, as the royal's performance filled the room with pure, unexpected magic. By the time William finished, the room erupted into applause. Cameras flashed. The legendary guitarist stood up, walked over, and shook his hand, saying only 4 words that made headlines the next morning. "You earned my respect." That night, the world saw a new side of Prince William. Not the prince in polished shoes, but the man with soul, rhythm, and courage. It was one of those crisp London evenings when royalty and celebrity blend under chandeliers and whispered conversations. The charity gala at the Royal Albert Hall was a dazzling affair. Elegant gowns, polished tuxedos, and every major media outlet waiting for a glimpse of the next viral royal moment. Prince William, ever calm and composed, arrived with his trademark modest smile, greeting guests as if he were just another attendee rather than the future King of England. The night's purpose was noble, raising awareness for mental health initiatives, a cause William had championed for years. The crowd included actors, philanthropists, and a handful of iconic musicians invited to perform short sets throughout the night. Among them was one of the world's most renowned guitarists, famous not just for his decades-long career, but also for his unfiltered humor and bold personality. His name alone commanded respect, and his words, often laced with sarcasm, could either charm or cut. As the evening progressed, laughter echoed through the hall. William mingled naturally, sharing light conversations with the guests. When he approached the musician, their exchange began harmlessly. The guitarist, glass in hand, smirked and said, "So, Your Royal Highness, I hear you're a fan of classic rock. Ever tried playing, or is air guitar more your style?" The crowd chuckled. Cameras didn't catch the moment. It wasn't on stage, just a casual circle of guests, but the tone in the room shifted. William smiled, unbothered. "I used to play a little," he replied, "but it's been a while." "Ah," the guitarist grinned, teasing further. "I'll bet you strum better than you swing a polo mallet." The laughter grew louder this time. It was lighthearted, yes, but there was a hint of challenge behind the joke. To everyone's surprise, William didn't walk away or change the subject. Instead, he looked toward the small stage where a few instruments from earlier performances were still set up. "Well," he said calmly, "there's only one way to find out, isn't there?" A hush fell. The audience, sensing something special, began to gather closer. Even the host of the evening seemed unsure what to do. Royals didn't just perform in public, not like this. But William, with quiet confidence, took off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and stepped toward the stage. The guitarist raised an eyebrow, half amused, half impressed. "All right, then," he said, handing over his prized instrument, a limited edition Gibson Les Paul worth more than most cars. "Show us what the royal family's been hiding." William slung the guitar over his shoulder, adjusting it like a man who had done this before. He strummed a few test chords, and the sound was surprisingly good. The crowd leaned in. Then, without hesitation, he began playing, soft, steady, and soulful. It wasn't just a random tune. It was Let It Be by the Beatles, a song filled with hope, reflection, and warmth. As his fingers moved across the strings, conversation stopped. The energy in the room changed. It wasn't perfect. He missed a note or two, but the sincerity in his playing silenced even the most skeptical faces. By the time he reached the final chords, the guitarist who had mocked him earlier stood frozen, his grin replaced by genuine admiration. When the last note faded, the room erupted in applause. Prince William smiled humbly, handed the guitar back, and said softly, "Guess I still remember a bit." The guitarist looked at him, stunned. "You didn't just remember," he said. "You played." And in that single moment, Prince William's quiet dignity spoke louder than any royal speech ever could. The sound of applause echoed through the grand hall, mingling with gasps and laughter of disbelief. Guests who had moments earlier been sipping champagne and exchanging polite small talk were now on their feet, clapping, cheering, and even whistling. No one had expected this. The future King of England had just played one of the most heartfelt renditions of Let It Be the room had ever heard. For a few seconds, Prince William simply stood there, smiling modestly, the spotlight catching the faintest glint in his eyes. It wasn't pride or arrogance, it was relief, maybe even joy. He had walked into a challenge he didn't plan for and turned it into a moment of connection that no one would ever forget. The legendary guitarist, the very man who had teased him just minutes before, was the first to break the stunned silence. He approached William slowly, still holding his drink, his expression unreadable. Then, with a small chuckle, he extended his hand. "All right, Your Highness," he said, voice louder now. "I'll admit it, you've got some serious chops." The crowd laughed and cheered again, but it was clear the guitarist wasn't joking anymore. He meant it. Cameras began flashing, phones came out discreetly despite the royal protocol, and within minutes, whispers of, "Did you see what Prince William just did?" began spreading across the hall like wildfire. William handed the guitar back gently, nodding. "Thank you," he said, "though I think I'd better leave the real playing to the professionals." But the guitarist wasn't ready to let the moment end there. "Nonsense," he said, strapping the guitar back on and motioning for a small band nearby to join in. "How about one more? Let's give them something to remember." The audience roared its approval. And to everyone's astonishment, William didn't decline. "All right," he said with a grin, "but only if you promise not to roast me afterward." "Deal," laughed the guitarist. The two began to play, an impromptu jam session that felt more like a conversation between equals than a royal stunt. The guitarist riffed freely, his notes fiery and fast, while William followed with rhythm and timing that surprised even the pros on stage. The chemistry was natural. Each chord, each smile shared between them, broke the invisible line between royalty and rock and roll. People recorded it secretly on their phones despite strict no-filming rules. And by the next morning, clips began surfacing across social media. Headlines from every major outlet filled the internet. Prince William stuns London gala with surprise guitar. Performance. Rock legend silenced by the future. King's musical talent. William's guitar. Moment wins the internet. Even those who weren't royal watchers couldn't help but admire him. The moment felt genuine, unscripted, human, and full of heart. Behind the scenes, though, William remained as grounded as ever. When asked later by a journalist if he had planned the performance, he smiled and said, "Not at all. I just thought it was time to have a little fun." But for those who witnessed it, it was more than fun. It was history. A night when a prince didn't need a throne, a title, or a crown to command respect. All he needed was 6 strings, a melody, and the courage to play when everyone expected him to stand still. That evening, as the crowd dispersed and the lights dimmed, the guitarist was overheard telling a friend, "I've played with legends my whole life, but tonight I jammed with a prince." And from that night forward, Prince William wasn't just the man destined to rule. He was the royal who rocked. The morning after the gala, London awoke to a wave of headlines that no one had predicted. Every major paper, from The Guardian to Rolling Stone, carried some variation of the same story. Prince William shocks the world with surprise guitar performance. Clips from the event were circulating everywhere, despite the no phones rule. Millions watched in awe as the future king strummed his way through Let It Be with genuine ease and soul. It wasn't just a viral moment, it was something deeper. People saw in William what they rarely got to see, a human being, not a symbol. For years he had carried the weight of expectation, every speech, every appearance polished and calculated. But in that moment on stage, he was just William, a man lost in music. What the public didn't know, however, was that his connection to the guitar ran far deeper than anyone had guessed. Long before royal duties consumed his schedule, William had quietly taught himself to play during his university years at St. Andrews. It was never meant for performance, it was a private outlet, a way to escape the relentless pressure of royal life. Late at night, while his peers partied or studied, William would sit by the window of his dorm room, strumming simple tunes. He once confided to a friend that music was his form of therapy. It allowed him to express what words couldn't, his grief over losing his mother, his anxieties about public life, and his hope for the future. That passion stayed hidden for years, overshadowed by military service, marriage, and royal duties. Occasionally, he'd play for his children, teaching Prince George and Princess Charlotte how to press their tiny fingers on the strings. Kate often teased him that one day he'd have to show the world what he could really do. He always laughed it off, until that night at the gala. After the event, as the royal motorcade drove back to Kensington Palace, William gazed out the window, still processing what had happened. "You surprised everyone," Kate said, smiling beside him. "Even me," he chuckled. "I didn't mean to. I just didn't want to let that moment pass. It felt right." "It was more than right," she replied softly. "You reminded people that you're more than just a title." By the next afternoon, messages of admiration poured in from around the world. Musicians, fans, and even critics who rarely praised royalty called his performance unexpectedly soulful. The legendary guitarist who had mocked him earlier gave an interview saying, "He's got more rhythm than I gave him credit for, and a heart that plays louder than any amp." For William, it wasn't about fame or validation. It was about authenticity. In an age where every move of the royal family was analyzed and politicized, this one spontaneous act had cut through the noise. That weekend, when his children asked him about the performance, he laughed. "I just played a little song," he told them. But George, ever curious, said, "Did people like it, Papa?" William smiled. "They did, but what mattered most was that I liked it." That answer summed up the entire experience. The guitar had reminded him of who he was beneath the crown, a man who found peace in the simplest things. And though he returned to his royal responsibilities soon after, those who saw him that night would forever remember something extraordinary, that behind the polished suit and practiced smile was a prince with soul, emotion, and a melody that could silence the world. Weeks after that unforgettable night, the world was still talking about Prince William's impromptu guitar performance. What was meant to be a simple charity gala had turned into a cultural moment, one that blurred the line between royalty and the everyday person. Talk shows replayed the footage, newspapers analyzed every expression, and fans worldwide praised him for showing courage, humility, and heart. But for William, life quickly returned to its usual rhythm. Meetings at Kensington Palace, public engagements, and royal duties filled his schedule again. Yet something had shifted. Wherever he went, people looked at him differently, not just as a symbol of the monarchy, but as a man who wasn't afraid to step out of his comfort zone. One afternoon, a letter arrived at the palace. It was from the same legendary guitarist who had mocked him that night. Written in neat handwriting on crisp stationery, it read, "Your Royal Highness, I've been on stage for over 50 years, but I've never seen a crowd react the way they did that night. You reminded me why music matters. It's about honesty, not perfection. That moment was bigger than both of us. Respectfully, you've got music in your blood. William smiled as he read it, tucking the letter into his desk drawer. It wasn't something he needed to display or talk about. It was a quiet reminder of what he had achieved simply by being himself. Over time, that single performance began to inspire others in unexpected ways. Young people saw it as proof that vulnerability and expression were not weaknesses but strengths. Royal watchers said it was the most human moment from a member of the monarchy in decades. Even those who didn't care much for royalty admitted that William's genuine nature had won them over. Behind palace walls, his children became his biggest fans. George begged him to teach him the chords to Let It Be, while Charlotte tried to hum along on a toy keyboard. "Looks like we've got a band forming," Kate joked one evening as she filmed them laughing together in the sitting room. For William, that was what it was all about, not headlines or praise, but the quiet joy of sharing music with his family, of feeling connected through something simple and timeless. Months later, when he was invited to another charity event, reporters couldn't help but ask the inevitable question, "Will we see you play again, Your Royal Highness?" William smiled knowingly. "You never know," he said. "But I think one surprise performance a year is enough." That answer became a classic William moment, graceful, understated, and sincere. Yet those who had seen the light in his eyes that night at the Royal Albert Hall knew that music would always remain a part of him. Maybe he would never perform publicly again, but it didn't matter. The legacy of that one song had already traveled far beyond the stage. Years later, when documentaries and retrospectives looked back at the future king's life, that clip of him strumming Let It Be would always resurface, not as a spectacle, but as a symbol of a man who carried the world's expectations on his shoulders and still found time to follow the rhythm of his own heart. And perhaps that was the real magic of the moment. A reminder that no matter how powerful or privileged one might be, it is our most human moments, the unplanned, the imperfect, the honest, that leave the deepest mark. That night, with just 6 strings and a simple song, Prince William didn't just silence the world, he moved it.